art was cheap and had too many helmets with horns on them, where it was hard to tell the difference between a painting dedicated to Odin and Freya from a Boris Vallejo fantasy art calendar. A world of chainmail bikinis and blonde Marvel Thor. One man stood up and said no. That man is Sam Fleegle. This episode of Heathen Talk is brought to you by Sam Fleegle at FaithfulSigns.com, featuring Norse mythology-themed art that explores the various legends and traditions of the ancient Germanic peoples. Faithful Signs offers prints, bags, and original art for sale from everyone from those interested in Norse mythology right up to the serious art collector. We'd like to thank Sam Fleegle for his support of the show and his contributions to modern heathen art.
Welcome to Heathen Talk, everybody.
Hey, welcome everybody.
So y'all like our first official real ad?
It was an interesting change.
Oh, yeah, it was. It was. It's really nice. Sam just launched a Kickstarter yesterday. It funded today. It's not the fastest ever to fund, but it's a real pleasure to see him get funded so quickly. For those who haven't heard yet, we've posted to social media. Sam's releasing a Illustrated Havamal based on the Bellows translation. For the month of December, he did 31 drawings based on different verses in the Havamal, and then is collecting them together into a hardcover book. To see the link, it will be in the description of the video, and it's also in the description of the podcast when you get it. If you're interested, it's going to be up for the next 28 days, and will be and is successfully funded. So, congratulations to Sam.
Exactly. That's so exciting to hear that, because his art is amazing, and I laugh. Torin, I want to give Torin credit where credit is due, because he did write that ad copy, the first part of it, and I mean it really is, given what we have access to as art. And Sam's stuff is just amazing, and I'm gonna brag for a minute. I get to actually meet him in a couple of weeks, because he and I will be at the same convention at Mid-South Con. So anybody's there, you can find me in the gaming room. I'm not hard to find. There's only 2 black people wandering on Mid-South Con, and I'm the only female.
So Josh, tell our listeners where they can find us.
Well, if you've got Facebook, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/heathentalk. You can always find our YouTube channel and watch our back videos at youtube.com/c/heathentalk. However, if you're going to be looking for us, you might as well just go to heathentalk.com and check us out there. You can find all of our episodes, our random blog posts, links to our swag, pretty much everything. And you can annoy Mark by finding us on, what is it, Instagram? Instagram.
Mark loves it when you post to Instagram.
Also Tumblr.
Mm-hmm.
He likes that.
And you can also tweet at Lauren, because she's the only one who uses the Twitter for Heathen Talk. If you're desperate, you can tweet at me. I'm not going to tell you my Twitter handle, because you'll have to find me.
If you go to the Heathen Talk, you can find it. Also, let's not forget that if you were listening to us on Stitcher, iTunes, don't care where, please go on, rate us. Give us 5 stars because you love us, or give us 5 stars because you love us. Like us on the various social media and on YouTube, because it helps people find us. For a while we had no ratings, so we actually didn't show up in some of the searches, which is weird. Thank you to everyone who has rated us, by the way.
And of course, if you like what we do and you want to support the project, you can always go to patreon.com/heathentalk, kick us a few bucks a month. We love hearing from you, and we always try to make sure that you get discounts on T-shirts, or we've got a couple other things in the pipe for you as backers. So we appreciate your support, and we're really happy to bring this to you every week. Hey, Torrin.
Thanks everybody for the white shirt thing that ended today, the special promo. So we got a new one coming up on the 16th.
Yeah, and speaking of the shirts, for those of you that don't have them, you'll see Toby and I are finally wearing our bloat shirts. And I'm so happy to have this shirt. I have been pushing for this shirt for, 9 months now, at least?
Something like that.
Since the first time I saw the white version.
Which would have been the first time I was on air with Heathen Talk.
Oh, well, so there you go.
Which would have been the first episode.
It would have been.
Well, I wasn't really on camera then. Any case, we do want to thank Brian Smith of White Marsh Theod, who is our guest tonight. Thank you very much.
Surprise guest, everybody.
Surprise!
You're very welcome for the shirt design. I hope it worked out well for you guys.
It really did.
Cool.
I just want to say that it was the best-selling design that we've put out. And as of right now, it's sold pretty well, and it's going to be available indefinitely. So go buy one, because.
Now, speaking of White Marsh Theo, that brings us to our toast for the evening. And no, it's not Brian. I don't know if we ever toasted him. Did we ever toast Brian?
No.
No.
Okay, I don't think we're going to.
Good.
Not tonight, certainly. We are going to toast the Lady of White Marsh, Sarah Fry. So you can see from the reactions there that a couple people know her personally here. So over the weekend, as some of you may or may not know, Toby and Josh came up to my neck of the woods to go take a look at the land and finalize a lot of the arrangements for Cascadia Moot. And Sarah came up with Toby. Now, when I say came up with Toby, I don't mean she just came from Idaho with Toby. She came from the other side of the country to be here for that. And I'm just going to go ahead and keep on pretending to myself that was her sole reason for being on the civilized side. But to be honest with you, she had a lot to share for this thing. And as one might imagine, being the lady of a group like White Marsh, she had a lot of really valuable insight, and she shared it freely with us, and it was immensely helpful. To me, I know it was immensely helpful to other people that were with us. And I'd like to thank her for coming out and helping out in her way with that.
Yeah, she's a special kind of lady.
I also did enjoy the hell out of her company. I can think of a few better strangers I've ever met before to drink with.
It was a good time.
So, to Sarah.
To Sarah.
To Sarah.
And she just jumped onto the IRC.
Awesome. So,
She doesn't suck too bad.
and I'm going to tell you guys, I've never met Brian in person. I've interacted with him a bit on the internet, and that's pretty high praise. You should hear what he says about Toby.
So what are you drinking?
Yeah. So, yeah, as is our tradition to tell you all what we're drinking because you actually asked for it. Let's start with Brian tonight. Brian, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking the Abita Pecan Harvest Ale. It's one of my favorite beers out of Louisiana.
The Abita man can.
Absolutely. It's really a great beer. You should really try it.
I'm a fan of Turbo Dog.
So, Toby?
It is the end of Red Chair season, so I'm drinking Deschutes Red Chair Northwest Pale Ale. It's one of my favorite beers, and every season I get excited when I start to see them in the stores.
I take it that one's a little bit more consistent than some of Deschutes' other seasonal offerings?
Yep. Very
Josh?
much so.
I am drinking it's the beginning of the spring, and Burnside put out a spring rye, and it's a single hop rye ale brewed with coriander.
That sounds delicious.
Quite delicious.
And Lauren, what are you drinking on the dry side?
I am drinking orange lemon water.
Oh, that
I thought you were going to say orange soda, which, that sounds pretty yummy too.
No, I can't do the carbonation after a certain point at night because I'm getting old. But I'm hoping you get some foo-foo fancy. I'm gonna break that rule too and get some foo-foo fancy root beer for next week.
Nice. And I'm drinking a beer that I found randomly from the Netherlands called Rukkenvoer. I'm not sure on my pronunciation there, but it's a barley wine. I think it's oak aged, and it's brewed with chili peppers, and it tastes every bit as awesome as you would expect from that description. I'm really enjoying the hell out of it.
I'm a little jealous, to be honest.
I can't get behind the pepper beer thing.
You know,
Yeah, but
Toby,
you should be nice because I have permission to push you downstairs.
Toby, this one's like super, super subtle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, when you take, that's the thing with barley wines. You make the beer and it's got all this stuff in it and it's strong as hell, and then you stick it in a barrel for 9 months or a year, and everything just mellows right the hell out. And that seems to be what happened here too.
So tonight, we're talking about a pet topic of Toby and Torrens, and I can tell you from personal experience, they can go rounds about this. I have seen it, and it has tempered my love of the subject. We're going to talk about the soul tonight. As you can imagine, that's going to get into a few different areas of conversation, but I have heard through the grapevine, more accurately through Toby, that Brian, you have some interesting opinions about and around the soul in Heathenry.
That's a good way to put it, I guess. Yeah, it's one of my favorite subjects to talk about because, well, it's like any other subject in heathenry. All the different fields kind of blend and weave into each other. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this talk. It's a pet peeve of mine, or a pet topic of mine.
So, why don't we begin with just what is the soul? What is it? What are we talking about when we discuss the soul? Just some baseline information from which we can move on. And Brian, I'd like you to start us off as our guest.
Oh, okay. The soul. Well, what does the word soul mean? What do we think of when we hear the word soul? A lot of people think of this like ghostly bag that sits inside of a human body and makes it move around like some kind of animated marionette. I like to think of it in a different direction. I like to look at the etymology of the word, and our English word soul comes from a Proto-Germanic "saluaz." Oh, I'm sorry, "selo." So it's but that word isn't really it doesn't really go anywhere. We can't be sure where it comes from. Now there are some interesting theories on that word, that it's related to the word "selaz," which is where our word sea comes from, as in a moving body of water. And that itself is derived from another word, "swayan," sorry, Proto-Germanic is a pain in the ass, "sawiage," which is a word that means to percolate, to rise up. And so I think one of the problems we as modern heathens have is we're using words in an incorrect fashion. To me, the soul is part of the entire being, but it's not this. It doesn't encapsulate all of the less than physical parts of the human being. Um, One of my favorite subjects is anthropogenesis, which is the idea, the creation of man
Mhm.
by deities. And so, one of the more interesting things about anthropogenesis is, if you look in the Prose Edda, it says when it talks about the sons of Bor finding the trees on the shore, it says, "Geef in verste ond och lief, anor vit och hering, thridi asonio, mar och heren och sion, gave them clothes and neven." And that basically says that the first one gave them ond, which is the breath of life, ond and life. The second one gave them wit or thought, and hering. And hering is this really interesting word. Hering means to stir, to bubble, to percolate. We have this idea of percolating, and that's the seat of emotion. The hurrying is the emotional aspect of it. It also corresponds with the three gifts, or the gifts given by the gods in the Poetic Edda, where it is Ond, Old, Allah, and Goldoletu, which is Ond, which is the breath of life, Old, which is the furious passions, those things that are stirred, and La, which is blood or warmth, and Goldoletu, which is good looks and good appearances. So we have this idea of the soul. To me, the soul is the stirring aspect of the emotional seat of humanity, and not just this ghostly puppet master that's moving around our bodies. I have a very firm belief that all things have a physical anchor in the world, and my belief is that what we call the soul, its physical anchor is the bones of the human body. I don't know. I feel like I'm monopolizing the talk here.
No. Please continue.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing, I'll tell you how my thought came about. I used to believe in the 9 parts of the soul that Edgar Thorson had in his diagrams and all that other nonsense. But over time, my ideas started to change and mature, and I started to realize that a lot of those ideas were based in ceremonial magic, like the Holy Guardian Angel and all that stuff. And so I started to look at the words themselves. And I was reading Alaric Hall, and I absolutely despise Alaric Hall. If he were in the room with me, I would punch him in his horse-toothed mouth. But
let it never be said that Brian minces words.
No, never. I mean, I can respect parts of his work, and other parts of his work I just want to burn. But he was going on about the color white in Germanic languages, and the word Alf. And the word Alf comes from a root that means dull white. It's not shiny white. When I was younger, I always thought, oh, elves were like these shiny white lights and kind of like will-o-wisps and everything like that. And then I said, okay, well, if Alf comes from a word that means dull white or matte white, what does that mean? Because it's obviously not these shining little lights and everything. And so I started to look at the stories of owls, and owls are always associated with the mound and the burial mound. And I'm like, okay, where's this connection between white and something in a mound coming from? And it kind of dawned on me when I was reading the Cuisine of Sacrifice, where they were talking about the burning of bones. And when you burn a bone at a high temperature, it calcifies and it turns into this dull white color. It has to be a certain temperature, but the whole idea in the Cuisine of Sacrifice was that you were burning away the impurities to get to the immortal part of the animal when it was sacrificed and put upon the fire. And it just kind of all clicked into place. I'm like, okay, so we're talking about possibly white bones here that have gone through the cremation process. The parts of the body that are no longer mortal or corruptible have been burnt away, leaving behind this pure, white, clean bone. And it just started. So my ideas have been building upon this idea that the bones are the physical anchor of this thing we call a soul. And because the bones are really the only immortal part of the human body, it makes sense. These bones are outlast us if they're kept in a proper manner and they're put in a proper and safe place. They'll last for thousands and thousands of years, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And so that's where my theories have been building upon the last couple of years.
Okay. So let's kind of break it down here. One thing I want to touch on is, I mean, in order for you to be correct, in order for these ideas to hold water, as it were, we would first need to prove, or at least allow for, the idea of physical anchors. And what proof do you have in terms of folklore or the lore that there are these physical anchors to these metaphysical objects?
Well, I guess it comes from the idea that in most pagan religions, it is a materialistic world that we live in. It is a materialistic worldview. And materialism, not in the sense of crass consumerism or anything like that. That everything has a substance. Everything has a substantial form in this world. If you look at the Greek gods, for example, most of us consider the gods as these non-corporeal beings. But to the ancient Greeks, gods were made of a very fine flesh, and they bled a very fine blood called ichor. And so they had substance to them. And so if we have this thing called a soul, it has to have some kind of substance to it. So that's where I'm thinking of the lines that there is a physical anchor. Even nebulous ideas such as gifting. There's a physical object. There's a substance that is given. So I don't really think that there are, religiously at least, I don't think there are concepts that don't have a physical. Even things like friendship. A friendship has a token gift. That gift is a material representation of that relationship, of that concept. There you go, of that concept. So it just makes sense to me. I can't prove it. That's the beautiful thing about anything dealing with the afterlife and anything like that. I mean, nobody comes back to tell you if you're right or wrong. So,
well, the best part about this conversation is going to be what you just said right there. At least from my end, is this is one of those conversations. Josh mentioned earlier that I have a bit of a passion for it myself. Not because it's what's that?
A bit.
Shut up, Josh. Nobody asked you.
Yeah.
But a lot of the ideas that I have about it are stuff that I can point towards little bits of circumstantial this, circumstantial that, and I cannot really say, here is good reason for it all.
Right.
Right.
I've got some ideas, and that's all they are. They're ideas.
Yeah.
I think they make a lot of sense. I can extrapolate on them.
Right.
And I can explain my ideas, but I can't prove my ideas.
Right.
And we can't force anyone to believe as we believe, nor do we really want to. I mean, the entire goal with these concepts, and the goal from the beginning, has been to present a system of belief as we have come to understand it, not set in stone, but definitely built from stones. That we can say that this is the foundation for what we think is, heathenry should be. In terms of the anchor piece, I find evidence for the anchors, and I'm on record as believing in that concept. In ancient Germanic law, going back to the time of conversion, whenever there was a real estate deal, there was an exchange of tokens, and it could be a pin. Usually, it was a knife or a glove. These are physical items of relatively no value that are nevertheless extremely important because you do not get them back until you have paid for the exchange of goods.
I'll take that one step further. How many people remember this growing up? Pwh! You know, you're spittle. Spittle. This is me. When we were kids, we used to be spit brothers, or you'd shake on something, you'd spit on it. You're creating there's a physicality to your spit. There's a physicality to blood. You know, there's something there to show those connections. I'm taking my spit, I'm putting it here, you take your spit, you put it there, we blend that spit together. There's a physical action. I mean, you don't have to have that there, but for some reason our elders did.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to one that's familiar to everyone. You get married. There is an exchange of rings. Yeah. Or even engagement. You know, I mean, there's so many relationships that are cemented with physical objects. I can understand where you're coming from with your particular perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see good argument for that point of view. I'm not sure yet that I buy it. And there's definitely you know, lots of good argument there, and I won't say I disagree with it yet. In my own mind, I've come to sort of see it in a slightly different way, in that there is no differentiation between the soul, if you will, and the body. That the body is just one more piece of what it is that makes up what a man is.
But that's exactly what I'm saying, though. There isn't any kind of real division. I mean, okay, look at it this way. We're all familiar with the 9-part soul construct that used to be in Etchard's books back in the 90s and the 80s. And we look back at it now, and it's kind of silly, but where's the utility in any of that? Oh, you got a Hugh, you got a Mean, you got an Own, you got the Older, you got the Lich. Where's the utility in any of that? How does that help you in any way? That's like saying, you know, the body is made up of multiple organs. Well, no shit. Of course it's made up of multiple organs. But, you know, a heart is just a heart. It doesn't have a life of its own. A brain is a brain. It doesn't have a life of its own. These things are all part of the whole construct. And that's why the whole idea of a soul being separate from a physical body, to me, in any real capacity, seems a ludicrous notion to me. And that's why I really kind of pinned down to the idea that, okay, well, if there is something to me, what I conceive of as the self, if there's something of me that exists past my life, it's going to be in the part of my body that survives past my life, and that would be the bones, because everything else is corruptible. And the other part about that really kind of hit home with me was when you're looking at the Poetic Edda. I'm sorry, no, not the Poetic, the Prose Edda, and you're looking in the prelude to it, or the prologue. Snorri goes into constant references of, oh, well, people believe that the bones of the giant were stones. Well, from other research that I've done in Iranian and Indian practices, stone was viewed as incorruptible, immortal, unchangeable. It was the only stone lasted longer. I mean, the rock you look at today is the rock that your children will look at 1,000 years from now. You know, barring dynamite and everything hasn't happened, or it's completely eroded away. But stone lasts forever, and these ideas of stone being immortal and the bones being immortal, because stones and bones have a poetic connection in the mythos, it just makes a lot of sense to me. I just don't view any kind of real separation between the body and the soul.
Right, it makes sense, absolutely. I just did want to touch upon one thing you said there that I think is I don't necessarily think that you're looking at it the wrong way. It's more along the lines of trying to, converse with the audience a bit, if you will, is not mistaking function for utility, or I guess reason for utility. Because you're asking a question like, what is the utility of the various parts that Thorson used to mention.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems like a bad question to me. There doesn't have to be a utility for it to be reality. Does that make sense?
No, I can see your point.
Right. So the parts that make us up exist because they make us up, not because they're useful for a particular thing. Now, whether or not they are useful for a particular thing is an entirely different part of the discussion.
Well, I'm sure there's an appendix to the soul somewhere, but I mean, the parts that make you up for a reason. Your lungs exist for a reason. Your heart exists for a reason. Your kidneys exist for a reason. Even the appendix at one point in time existed for a reason. Just because we don't eat cellulose anymore doesn't mean that the organ didn't have a purpose. It didn't have utility.
I'm going to call that the vestigial Draugr from now on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I always try to look at things from a utilitarian point of view. It's like, if it serves a purpose, it serves a purpose, and if it doesn't, these tend to fall away. I don't know. Don't mind me. I've been drinking.
So there is one thing I want to bring up, and that's the concept of halig, or hailful, and I think it's an important piece because it's a wholeness, a healthy wholeness of all. You aren't a component of multiple pieces. You are this thing that is
complete.
Yeah, unto itself, and like. Is the soul me? Like, what is me? What is the self? And this is kind of getting away from religion and into the realm of philosophy, but I think it's very important to ask these questions. What does it mean to be an individual? What does it mean to be the self? What does it mean to be me? And ultimately, what I have come to learn is that only that which becomes, only that those actions that have impact and cause reactions is reality. I, as a concept, am my deeds. You are your deeds. I am that which I have done. So where this is leading me to the idea of the soul, whatever its substance is, whatever its parts are made up of, me that exists after death is the result of those actions I have taken in life. And one of the best pieces of support I have for that is the imperishable fame concept in Indo-European cultures. The idea of to be remembered is to be immortal. Achilles at the walls.
I'm really glad that was not an original thought of mine.
And we see it in the concepts of ancestor worship, in the sense that we keep the memory of our ancestors alive. We tell their stories. We share their deeds. They become almost mythical and live on far past their own life, and they influence their descendants, and they continue to form that pattern. I don't know if that is just a simple mechanistic description of life everlasting, or if there's more to it than that. I suspect there's more to it. I'm not that smart to describe something whole and complete and very simply. I always, there's always more to it than I actually understand or am able to communicate. But it's a concept that I think is important to discuss when you're just discussing the soul, and that's the role of what we do and the fame that we earn during our lives, and why it's so important for us to have children and influence the next generation to be remembered. And I'd kind of like to hear your thoughts on that, everyone. We can start with Torin, or Josh. You said you've got something. You've been noodling something.
No, it was the idea of immortality. My mom occasionally asks me what I'm doing about my immortal soul and whether or not I'm going to heaven and going to spend eternity with Jesus. And my response had been, my goal is to be remembered because that's what immortality is. And you validated that thought of mine, so.
Well, I'm glad I can validate you.
I do
You're a
want
bastard.
I could just kind of jump off something you said real quick, Toby. The other thing that I think that with the wholeness, something to tie in is that it is so closely tied with holy, which can be a word that's kind of weighted for people who grew up like I did, but just, the wholeness and holiness are very closely related as far as my understanding is. Granted,
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it would make sense. My mind is not made up on the soul topic. I personally, it's kind of like the afterlife thing. I just don't care.
Have another drink. You don't care. Have another drink.
I can't drink. But it's like the afterlife topic in the sense that it's not something to dwell on because it's there are day-to-day things that are important and things to get done, but like I think that's the wholeness and the holiness is something that's very important, and that's actually something. The wholeness is something that I focus on a lot in my particular personal development.
Yeah, well, I mean, being whole and being healthy and being haleful is important. I mean, for very down and dirty regular days, healthy people are happy people. It's good for you to be around for your family and your folk. I mean, this is good. It gets a little off to the topic, a little off topic, but still important. Being healthy and hale and whole is also important if you're going to maintain any kind of relationship with the sacred numinous. And I don't necessarily mean the tribal gods of the universe. I mean it's your house god, the spirits of the land around you. I mean, being in a good relationship with them entails that you be holy. But again, that's kind of drifting off topic. But it's important enough to take that moment to digress and say that. Brian, what do you think about the concept of imperishable fame and being remembered?
Well, I kind of my thoughts on that are a bit unorthodox, I suppose. I do believe in a very long-lasting sense of of identity, of the self. I believe that lasts past our mortal coil. As I said before, I honestly believe it has a lot to do with the intactness of the bones. But I think eventually most people just are forgotten because it's the doom of men that they forget. And I think that once a person is forgotten as an individual, they enter into that chorus of the generic ancestors. And that's another thing that I kind of extrapolated from Hall's book, Elves in Anglo-Saxon England. He's like, well, what the hell is an elf? It's not exactly this outdwelling being, but it's not exactly this human thing. And my views on this changed dramatically. I once had a man in my hold by the name of Ray who kept insisting that the Elfe were ancestral spirits, and I'm like, I kind of like the idea of them being, these critters. And he's just like, no. He kept harping on it, and it turns out I think he was probably right. I think eventually you kind of morph into this transpersonal entity of an Alf, and because a person doesn't remember you as the individual, you just become this other thing, this in a lot of ways greater thing, because the personality is kind of removed from it or forgotten. It's not a very comforting thought for people who are wrapped up in the idea of ego and this is me. I don't know. I mean,
Well,
So I want to.
no,
We're still on the subject of fame, right? Can we answer the question from the IRC real quick?
Sure.
Does it matter how accurately you are remembered?
No.
I would say it's almost better that you're not accurately remembered sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree.
we tend to idealize people and their memory. Don't speak ill of the dead. Dead men commit no bad deeds. I mean, we idealize the dead in a lot of ways.
Shit, me and my friends are doing it wrong.
Well,
Well, I mean, in general, and as a even now as a as you ready for it? Overculture. Yeah, just had to do that. We think about to bring up kind of some popular culture here. Think when Michael Jackson died. There were all these accusations and this, that, and the other, but then all of a sudden he's dead, and oh, such a tragic loss, and blah 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 blah. We do that in general with people who've died, and I don't think you're going to be remembered accurately. Period. I don't think there is a way, because it's just the nature of stories. They change and evolve over time. The story that we tell about my great-great-grandfather is probably not 100% accurate, because the story was told, to my great-grandmother, and then, it comes down through the line, and it's playing that game of telephone. And we want to make our ancestors sound better than they were.
Well, also another way to think about that is why would you willingly talk bad about somebody who just got superpowers? No, but think about it.
Yeah.
Think about that. I mean,
That's a fair point.
it's taboo in our society to speak ill of the dead unless they were really rot-gutting bastards, like Jeffrey Dahmer or something like that. Oh yeah, Grandpa drank a lot and he slapped Grandma around once or twice, but Grandpa was a great guy and he took me fishing. You don't talk bad about the dead because they've got superpowers now. The elders have the ability to curse the younger generations. When a father cursed a person, he didn't curse up the chain. He didn't curse his father. He didn't curse his great-grandfather or anything like that. A father had the ability to curse his children. A father had the ability to curse his grandchildren. The curses can go down the line. So when you've got somebody who's crossed over that threshold and has gotten superpowers, why on earth would you speak ill of them? It's better just to not speak of them at all.
Well, and you see a lot of that as well. People who were shits to their family often just don't get spoken of. They're purposefully forgotten.
I would say, in the case of, when I said earlier about me and my friends doing it wrong, that wasn't entirely a joke. We do speak ill of our dead, in a manner of speaking. When we do toast them, is we have a tendency to... Sorry, what's that, Toby?
You don't. I've seen you do it.
I agree with Toby.
You have this. It's the magnificent bastard level of camaraderie.
You've never seen the left-handed toast we do once a year for Mishka.
No, but I have seen you toast them, and all the same. Memory distills.
It does.
Memory distills the subject down to the essence of it, and that means that what we remember becomes the most important facet of that memory to us. And if we speak ill of the dead, then that means we're carrying that around with us forever.
Well,
And
here's a way of looking at it: is we constantly harp on about you being, you are your deeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a continuously evolving thing for a person. You can be a complete and utter piece of shit who later on becomes a good person because of what you do. As far as the rest of us still, for us the living, once a person dies, there are no more deeds. So that's when a person becomes something more than what they do. They become what they did. You speak of the person in the language of who they are rather than what they did at that point. Does that make sense, the way I'm putting that?
I think I see where you're going with it. We're getting some background noise.
Got
The
it.
biggest challenges.
Go ahead, Josh.
Oh no, I was quoting the background noise.
But no, there's definitely a good point to what Brian says, and I think the influence there's still the idea that we the living still have influence on the dead. That is not something that we should ignore either. We bring them gifts. We obligate them in the same way that we obligate other holy powers, other sacred numinous to give back to us. And what we say about them becomes a certain level of reality, and how we choose to remember them becomes important into the influence that they have on us moving forward. And I think that's an important piece to also bring up. I mean, and like all things, it's not just one thing. We can sit here and say, well, it's the dead have superpowers, or we can say the dead are remembered the way we want them to be, and I don't think it's necessarily one or the other. I think it's one and the other. I think that these are all layers of ways in which we interact with people, and it's messy and it's difficult and it doesn't always work out to our favor, but it is what it is.
It's not this, but it is this.
Yes.
That's where you get that. I think it's really hard for a lot of people in my circles to grasp is the concept of instead of either or, you get yes and.
Mm-hmm.
And that yes and thing is just difficult to wrap your head around.
Long story short, you don't think it be like it is, but it do.
Go back to a thought somewhere we were with the thought about forgotten. You kind of go into this ancestral chorus. I find that kind of comforting. Which, for me, one, as somebody who isn't having children, I find that comforting to know that, because I joke many times that I'm gonna die and become DCer and harass my family, but in truth, that's kind of what I hope happens. To be part of that female ancestral spirit. We did have a question from the IRC. We've got some people.
Sorry, Lauren. Let me jump in and make one comment on your statement. The DCer Ilfa or the Odessa Ilfa dichotomy is interesting. It's comforting for you to think you're going to become the DCer because they become the essence of motherhood, and the Ilfa or the Alfar have that strange antagonistic dichotomy that I think sums up fatherhood in a very real sense, that it is both protective and punishing. Like, I find that relationship with those two ancestral choruses to be incredibly powerful commentaries on how we see motherhood and fatherhood, respectively.
Yeah. Well, it's something I know from talking with heathens that happen to be involved with 12-step programs, and when you talk about that higher power, um, that for and I've been very open with that on the show that I'm in recovery, and for me, that higher power that I use is my DSeer because it is that nurturing, mothering spirit, and I find that really nice. It's comforting, and it's something reliable I can go to, and like I said, that's a whole nother show, but. Yeah, I agree with you there, Toby. I think it's very interesting, and I think that it is a very comforting thing. We do have a question from the IRC, and I do want to get to this before we get too far off topic. This is from Dapper Heathen. So I'm confused. If once you're dead, you can't have any more deeds, then why would you care if you piss off your ancestors? Or
So
normally.
I actually kind of want to step in here because I had a thought.
Go ahead, Josh.
I think you're only getting part of the point. When you die, what you're remembered for are your deeds. Your soul, if I understand Brian correctly and his thoughts on it being anchored, because it's anchored, it's still there. You're still interacting with the world. You're part of your tribe still. You just happen to have superpowers. You're remembered for those deeds, and that is what continually ties you to those people. So it's a good idea not to piss him off because he's still there, but he's not having the same kind of impact he would have if he were flesh and bones right in front of you.
Yeah. Sorry, I was gonna go real quick because I'm the one that said it, and I wanted to be clear that I'm talking about what we the living can actually attribute to the individual. When we form the narrative of who a person is, we work with what their deeds have been. So that when we're forming that same narrative of who a person was after they've died, all we have to work with is what they did when they were living. I don't know what my grandfather has done since his death. If there are any deeds that he's done that are even done in a way that we would understand from our very much living perspective. So I can't form any sort of an extended narrative of him post-death. All I know is who he is or who he was based on his deeds in his life.
Brian, you had a thought?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say that the dead can most certainly impact the world of the living. If you look at traditional societies, when a sickness or something like that enters into the village or enters into the family, well, the first thing you want to do is eliminate the notion that it's witchcraft from, those bastards outside of your yard. And once you've eliminated that, if it's not those bastards over there, well, maybe it's because of the bastards who live within, and you've done something to offend the ancestors, and they go to the ancestors' graves or what have you, and they basically beg for forgiveness. We don't know what we've done. We don't know how we've offended you. We don't know if we've neglected you. We beseech you, do not allow this death or this sickness to continue to take lives. The ancestors are viewed as having a very tangible effect upon the living. And as I said before, the elder is the person who can curse down. And the person who is the most recent dead elder, he's still the elder. And my buddy Daniel, Daniel Lord of Overland, we talk about this all the time because it's not an issue of worshiping your dead. And that's the thing I frickin' hate about heathenry. Oh, ancestor worship, ancestor worship. No, it's elder worship. There is only one word in Old English that encapsulates the idea of an elder and an ancestor, and that's eldra. Eldra. And that means both you're living and you're dead. I mean, I don't particularly care for my father, but I worship and honor my father. I do as I'm supposed to do as a good son. I don't honor him as an individual. I honor the position. Just as I honor my grandfather. My grandfather was not necessarily a good man by our stretch of the words. I mean, he did the best that he could in the time that he lived in. But I'm told by everybody who knew him that he would have absolutely, completely disliked me, and I would have hated his guts. But I honor him nonetheless. I tend to his grave. I take care of his grave. I make offerings. I teach my children to do the same thing. And when my father passes on, he will become the most recent head dead of the family, and he will take that position as the dead elder, and I will take upon the position of the elder. So get past the notion of ancestor worship. It's elder worship. It's you might not like your parents, but they're your elders. And that's the way both Daniel and I look at it. Really not popular in the "Hey, mom, I'm going to go be a fucking heathen" world that we live in. But that's the way I've come to understand the concept.
And there is also the hope that in death, our family members make much better family than in life. My grandmother was a particularly vain and difficult woman to love. In death, however, I have nonetheless honored and worshipped her for the same reasons that she is still that connection I have to backwards through time and backwards into that chorus, because that chorus is where the vast majority of power eventually resides. Older things are more real.
Well, 99% of a human defect is the 4 pounds of fat between your ears. And when the body's gone or when it's put on a pyre, that 4 pounds of fat vaporizes or rots away. So I'm kind of hoping that we actually do become better human beings in death than we ever were in life, because the thing that causes us to be douchebags and terrible people to each other goes away because it doesn't exist anymore. And so if there is a part of my soul or my being that can be separated from that, I hope that's what lives on.
Yeah. Lauren, Josh, any?
I kind of think that when and was this a little on the woo metaphysical side, but I don't care. I like to think that we kind of develop a new understanding of how the world works when we're not necessarily when we die.
Mm-hmm.
When we're not wrapped with like the day-to-day surviving. And that's totally MUS, but still kind of like I said, a hope that,
just the idea that death is a bit of a perspective shift.
Yeah. I'm not the greatest person at times, and I'm hoping, I'll be a much better person.
I'm a fan of the Peter Pan view of things. Death is going to be an awfully big adventure.
Yes.
I thought you were going to say that you were never going to grow up from then.
I've already accepted that. Real quick, I want to take us on a bit of a tangent, because a question has come up that we get fairly often, and I think I have an answer, and I think Brian might be able to provide a good answer to this question. So, do you have any advice for coming to peace with shitty family and learning to respect their opinions? My advice: you don't have to respect their opinions. Just suck it up and be a good part of the family. I know it's hard advice, but it's the best advice I can give.
Well, the question on IRC says respect their position, not their opinions.
Oh, position. I thought I.
Yeah.
Thought
No, that's okay, because I agree with you. I don't have to respect their opinions, but I do respect their position.
Yeah.
As for that, sometimes you gotta wait till they cross over, man. I mean, I didn't like my grandmother. I did not like my grandmother. My grandmother, on her 86th birthday, said something about my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, And I never heard what it actually was, but one of my cousins says, "Oh, Grandma said something nasty about your girlfriend," and I never spoke another word to her while she was alive. Because honestly, I think that was still part of me honoring her position. It was easier not to fight with her. It was easier not to get into confrontation with her. I managed to maintain the frith, even though back then I didn't understand the concept of frith. I managed to maintain the frith because if I had gone and said, "Hey, Grandma, smacked her around in the nursing home," um, that would have created a lot of strife in my family. So to maintain the peace in my family, it was just easier not to talk to her. But when she passed over, and I helped to put her in the ground, I had a sense of peace because, like I said before, 99% of the problems that we as human beings have with each other is the 4 pounds of fat between our ears. No longer had an electrical signal going through it. It was in the process of decay, and you know, that then she just became a position to me, and I was able to say, okay, this is the woman who gave birth to my father, who gave birth to me. I can respect that position, even though I didn't have to like them as a human being. Because my grandmother was not a loving person. She was a very cold woman, you know. I can remember my entire life saying, "I love you, Grandma," and she'd be like, "Oh, that's nice." You know, whose grandmother says shit like that? Oh, that's nice. See you later. But she was the same way with her children. She was a product of her time. She was a product of her upbringing. She just was what she was. And in death, she's not those things. She's the position. And I honor the position. I tend to her grave. I teach my children to do the same, in the hopes that one day they'll forgive me for the horrible, awful, rotten bastard I've been, and respect the position, I suppose. So you don't have to respect their opinions, and sometimes it's just a lot easier when they're in the ground to respect the position.
So, Lauren, I know you had a bit you wanted to get to. I want to give you the opportunity to do that.
To me, that comes into something that I have harped on before, and that is knowing how to create healthy boundaries. I mean, really, when you can creating kind of healthy boundaries with people who you have less than ideal relationships with is, I think, the key to maintaining frith most of the time. At least it has been in my experience. If you have a family member who, like Brian's grandmother says that kind of stuff, he did the thing. He did not deal with her in face to face because of that. I think that's just really super important, because that is also looking out for what is best for the group and the tribe, and obviously having people not fighting is good. And that, to me, that's important to me because I struggle with that. I struggle with some of those things because I don't come from a family where things are, like I wish they were. And there's huge religious differences, but at the same time, after family members have passed, I've felt more of an acceptance and from their position, even from some of those family members who are extremely evangelical and like Josh, the ones that I'm going to hell for breathing sometimes. But,
So there's a couple of things I'd like to. I mean, again, we're getting a little bit on a tangent here, but the idea that
Sorry, guys, it's my bad.
it's okay. I personally think it's a good tangent here because it's important.
Everybody struggles with this, whether you have a really crappy family or you have a fantastic family. I come from an amazing family. I was loved growing up. I was given everything that I needed to be given. I was taught amazing life lessons. I am the person I am because of who my parents are. They still fucked me up in some serious and permanent ways. They did the best they can, and they still screwed me up. And we all have to deal with that trauma. Everybody has trauma. Everybody has, severe psychological damage because of who they are and who they grew up with. It is what it is. Everybody has to learn in their own way how to deal with that. And sometimes it's easier for people, and sometimes it's harder. And that's just the way. That's just the way Orla is, and you should check it occasionally. But that being said, there's a question in the IRC from Dan Flores. I'm going to read the question, and then I'm going to throw the question out and ask a different question, but I think it's very important. The question is, I know we all agree witches should be chucked into a sealskin bag, but given some of the abilities they have to screw with you, with the soul, how do you safeguard against it? So now I'm going to chuck that question out, because this is about the soul, not about witches and sealskin bags, and instead talk about, can the soul be harmed? Is the soul corruptible? Those questions. And I'm going to present that to you, to the forum we have here, to the host. And I'm going to start with our guest, because I know exactly who that question was meant for. Brian?
Can the soul be harmed? Sure, why not? Anything can be harmed, I guess. If we look at the soul as the totality of the human being, we know that human beings have a dynamistic power. It's called might, Megan. And that can certainly be taken away from people. Witches are quite good at that. That's why you burn them or drown them in sealskin bags. Yeah, I mean, soul sickness, I think that's definitely a realistic thing. How do you protect against it? Iron? Lead? I don't know. There's all sorts of apotropic devices and techniques in the folklore. Yeah, sure. I think a sealskin bag is great, but
you fight. How do you fight? How do you fight gunfights? How do you fight fist fights? You bring better guns and you bring more of them, and so how do you fight against witchcraft? Is really witchcraft.
Yeah, pretty much.
But the reason I asked it in that particular manner is that there are plenty of stories about violating tombs and exhuming the dead in order to punish them. Those kinds of actions, which leads me to think that yes, whatever exists after life, whatever being soul sick, harming the soul is definitely a thing. How do we protect it? That's getting into some serious questions that, I mean, those aren't questions about fundamentals. Those are questions of technique, and I don't like to share technique. I think that's privileged information.
Yeah.
Better witches.
Yeah, better witches.
I'm telling you, when my grandmother gets around to dying, I have no fears at that point, because that's like bringing a nuke to a gunfight.
Can bringing that in, can our relationships with the elders, the dead, protect us against witchcraft? Is that a thing?
I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say so.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know enough about the subject to really have an opinion, so I'm going to defer to those that do.
I don't. Yeah, Stuff wigs me out. Like, it makes me severely uncomfortable. It really does. I mean, and a little
It's
discomfort is
adorable.
good. Shut up, Josh.
Well, I mean, I think part of this ties into other concepts we've touched on in the past before, like luck. And I know that I'm not sure how much Brian or Toby would necessarily agree with me on the idea of luck necessarily being tied to those things that make up the person, the soul, if you will, to go back to the terminology we started with. But luck is a piece of the soul, I guess, just as the body is a piece of the soul, at least in my way of thinking. And so I would think that when you're talking about the luck that resides within an individual upon death is still a potent thing, if that makes sense. It's barely making sense to me. I have a hard time with this.
I think to me with the luck, I think that, to me, my ancestors, now they've passed on, they're the cultivators of the family luck. And so, if that makes any sense, now I feel like I'm not making sense. But I feel like they're the cultivators, like if it were a garden. And so they are, in that essence, able to help ward off things that might diminish the family's luck, like witchcraft. This is where I plug, if you want to read more about Icelandic spells and healing. It's a great book.
Would you like to know more?
Actually, we gave this book away a few weeks ago, Norse Magical and Herbal Healing, which has it's basically just a translation of Old Norse healing charms. Interesting stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's sources are not hard to find. Good sources, however, are a little harder. It's opened up a whole can of worms that I'm not exactly comfortable with. I mean, these get down to questions of technique, and I think that certain things are, like I said earlier, it's privileged information. It's information that we keep to ourselves for two reasons. I'm not going to tell you how to make a thermonuclear bomb. I may tell you that a thermonuclear bomb is possible. I may discuss the principles of fission or fusion or fusion actually, that create a thermonuclear bomb, but I'm not going to run you through the steps and the machines and the tools that you need to use it. That would be irresponsible of me, and I'm not exactly a fan of it. And above all, I'm not qualified to tell you any of these questions. Like, I fully make my credentials known. I am no witch. I am no trafficker in the occult. At best, I am a technician, or at best I consider myself a philosopher priest. I think about things, and I learn those techniques that I know will get certain results, and I do so in a very careful way, and I'm not going to share half-formed, ill-advised ideas on what to do if that would make me responsible for bad things happening to other people that I'm not exactly I don't want to be responsible for. It comes down to, if I insult you, I want to have meant it. If I hurt you, I want to have tried to. If I do so out of ignorance or incompetence, that's really on me, and that's not something that I want to be responsible for. So that's all I want to say about that.
I'm not going to teach you how to make a knife just so you can stab me with it. No, ain't happening.
Also, you need to actually I'm not going to put you in a car if you. And I'm not going to put you in a race car if you can't drive a Camry.
Oh, I totally would. I totally would, just to see what I would do that just to see what happened. But I'm also going to make sure that I'm not anywhere near that road when it happens. I'll be watching from some binoculars, eating popcorn.
Well, to
'Cause I'm a
expand upon to expand upon your analogy real quick, Brian. Some people don't have the tools to make a knife.
No, some people are tools.
Can we take you guys?
How nice to talk about me like that.
He doesn't have a belief in the concept of existence before birth, and this, as a woman, and with the whole debate we get sometimes about various and sundry things like abortion. That's actually something that I think is interesting and important to discuss to help people make up their mind about that kind of thing.
All right, who wants to start on this one?
Yeah,
I don't think you're a person until you've been named.
I agree.
Yeah. To expand upon that, I guess my opinion will be sort of. You sort of have an existence before birth, but not as an actual full person. The parts of you, I believe, exist before birth. But until they've been brought together into an entire person, then no. And I think that happens sometime around about a year old.
I am upset because I had just covered that. For those who are interested in learning a little bit more about a more unified soul body, like a non-dualistic concept of the soul, this guy right here, The Semiotics of Fate, Death, and the Soul in Germanic Culture, is probably one of the best sources on that you can find. She talks about bodies of water, which brings us back to the concept of percolating and rising up being the housing of the unborn. Go ahead, sir.
No, you're right. I'm just chuckling because, it's funny how these things all interweave on themselves.
Yeah. I just find it funny that I ended up having to reread this. No, it's a yeah. I think that there's something that exists prior to incarnation, for lack of a better word. I don't think the self exists in the same way that in the ground is some ore that will eventually make its way into whatever tool that I am using to create something, or the tool itself, or the object itself. It exists prior to. There is a pre-existence in the fact that there is something that predates that object, and even a post-existence in that something after that object exists, like the remnants of that object, like when the ore in the ground predating the sword exists, and then the sword is shattered and its pieces are deposited in a bog. I don't know that saying unborn children, or I don't know that the concept that we're thinking of, that there are souls waiting in an ethereal lobby for their next go around on the merry-go-round, is the proper way to think about it. I think that there's some sort of substance that exists. Bodies of water. Water is always a creative element. Things are born out of water.
So,
Now,
just to be clear, go ahead, Lauren.
Title of that book again?
It is The Semiotics of Fate, Death, and the Soul in Germanic Culture. It is by Prisca Augustin. It's fantastic and dry as the Sahara. It is a difficult slog, but it's worth it.
And it is going to be in our. It will go into our Amazon store right now. I'm doing it right now. So.
And
very expensive.
Yeah.
I was going to.
$53.
I apologize to your wallet.
So, just to be clear on the ultimate outcome of that answer, I believe that the vast majority, if not all of the people speaking to you here today, are advocating the idea that infants are not people.
I don't have an opinion on that. Experience would be, I agree with you in the sense that I know where you're coming from on that.
So there is a question that sort of ties into this a little bit that popped up from Jay Spencer. So going with the current line of thought, soul would be imparted with name? And I have an answer to that. I suppose you guys do as well.
Mm-hmm.
My answer would be that the naming of a child isn't so much an action imparting a soul as it is a recognition of something that has happened.
No, I disagree.
Okay.
I believe that the giving of a name and giving of a gift is what sets it in motion. When you look at the Rosetta, gave them clothes and a name. The man they named Ash, the woman they named Embla. I mean, you're something, but you're not you. You're not you until you're given a name. We organize thought with language, and so you existed as this nebulous concept, but when we give you a name, that's when you become you. That's when your Orlay is set. So no, I think the name is absolutely important, and I think the giving of the gift is the thing. I mean, you give a child its swaddling cloth, you give a child its first onesie or something along those lines. You've given something to this child with his name. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to disagree with you on that one.
Fair enough.
Well, I think to me, it can be in some difference between, how, and this also comes to how you think about things, but, you look at the practice of naming and how names were chosen to impart certain qualities on a person. It would only make sense to me.
It's like we were talking before. It's the anchor of the
Yes.
action. It's the anchor of the interaction. The name is a gift. The first possession is a gift. It's this physical manifestation. It's this audible manifestation of Orla. I mean, here's your first thing. Orla means literally first layer. Here's the first thing about you. It is your name. It is your first thing that I've given to you.
I want to get to this question real quick here. Somebody asked that I had a brother that died when he was 2 days old. He was named, but at 2 days old, is he worth honoring? I guess I kind of want to talk about because we as a culture, an overculture, tend to name children, pretty quickly, even sometimes before they're born. That comes into play. I know, there's also the gift, but what is everybody else's opinion?
I think it depends on your family, to be honest. Some families are going to see that 2-day-old as the most important thing that has ever happened, and it's going to carry a level of weight that in other families it just won't.
I will never come between a mother and what she considers her child. I'm not smart. I'm not that smart, but I'm not that stupid either. House cult is inviolable, and how a house decides to order its own affairs, I'm never going to interfere with. That's bad luck.
That's honestly the best answer I think that can be given to that question.
Absolutely.
Worship is recognizing worth. If you give worship, and I'm not talking about, like genuflect and everything like that. I'm talking about if you give worship to something, you are by default recognizing its worth in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel comfortable honoring that child, if you feel comfortable worshiping that child, well, then it obviously had worth and impact upon you. If it didn't have impact upon you, if it didn't have worth to you, you wouldn't give it worship. I agree with Toby 100%. This is a family thing. This is the Hearth cult, and and if anybody tells you that, tell them to fuck off.
That right there is solid advice.
Fuck
Yeah.
off.
The other thing I would mention here, and because I've been on this kick, is the idea that certain events are so important to a people, to a house, to a family, to a person, that the impact of that event has ripples that go in both directions. And I come from a family where we have lost children in my lifetime. And had to deal with that, and I've seen the ripples that occurs both backwards and forwards. Like, a really powerful event changes the way we look at the past. It changes the way we look at the events that precede it. And something like a child's death changes every like painting the nursery, building the crib. It becomes a completely different meaning than it had at the time that you were doing it. And that's the power of weird to affect both the past and the future. And I think that's an important concept to note. We have a couple more questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get to them. We've got a couple more minutes. Elglad.
There's one. Before we
Yeah.
get to Elglad's question, because Kevin, I love you, but your question is not quite as important as the other one, I think. Changing your name. Whether, and I know specifically this is in the case of children. I've seen it in the IRC, changing a child's last name. How does that impact them? What if the name is so important? What does that change? For instance, I was adopted. I was born a Riggs. Now I'm a White. How has that impacted my soul, my luck, my Orla, all of that?
It has an impact. It does. The adoption process in particular changes you. You become different than you were before, and in the same way as I mentioned with the concept of how a death or a major event has ripples that go both directions. I think the act of adoption, I mean, in terms of just legal ramifications, has major changes. I have an adopted sister. She is my sister. It doesn't matter that she comes from a different family. She has a legal stake in my parents' estate. There are obligations on my part that must be fulfilled. There are obligations to her children when she has them, may they be many years in the future, that I, being who I am and what I am, must honor in order to maintain the identity that I have developed over these years. I think that's a different thing than the concept of changing your name, or adopting a new name, which is very common in heathenry, and less common now, but much more common in the past. That's a different kettle of fish, and I don't know that we have time for that.
Well, I would say
I
in
didn't
this
necessarily
case,
want to get into that. I would specifically with children and adoption.
I would say in this case, Josh, your name didn't get changed. Your name is Josh. Your family got changed.
Well, if I may, just because I know we're running tight, but you're given your birth name. If you change your name, that's not a gift. That's not something that you're given. That's something that you've adopted. That's something that you've taken on. So if you want to turn yourself from Bruce Jenner into Caitlyn Jenner, that's not a gift that somebody gave to you. That's something that you have done for yourself. That is a deed, but it's not changing essentially who you are, because it's not as though it wipes out all your previous deeds. You know, no, it doesn't work that way. You're given your name, and with it your Orlay.
Unless you happen to be like a friend of mine who's transgender who's changed his name, whose name was given to him again by his parents. He let his parents rename him.
That's actually really phenomenally cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it
raises interesting questions.
different.
But,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I mean, there's a difference between your name and the name of your family. And I think that's an important distinction for this particular question.
Yeah. All right. I think at this point we're going to have to call it. There are a couple more questions, but we're not going to get to them, and we're not going to give them the time that they deserve. Facebook.
Go to Facebook. Go to put your questions up there, and we'll keep talking with you about it through the week on our various social media platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So again, like us, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, do all the social media things. Once again, thank you, Sam Flegel, for your continued support. His Kickstarter is funded. That does not mean if you don't want to continue to support it, you should go out and you should buy his stuff. It's going to be fantastic. Brian, thank you very much for being on, especially on such short notice. Brian's going to be back in a couple of weeks to talk Theodish Belief. I'm really looking forward to that. Next week we're going to have Sam. Is that right?
Next week we have Sam to talk about his Art of the Havamal and his Kickstarter. So if you haven't, or like me, and haven't quite gotten in there and backed it, you'll have all the more reason after we talk with him next week.
All right. So on that note, hey guys, y'all are doing it wrong.
You're not the boss of me.
I am the
I was
boss of
going to
him.
say that's
And I'm the boss of the rest of you, so...
Everybody have a great week.
You too. Thank you.